Hello everyone. My throat has been for way better times than the ones I'm facing right now. For some reason, man, for someone who speaks so much, I don't know. No, wait, if you speak a lot, your throat gets worse over time, right? It's like a used artifact tool, like John Bon Jovi. I don't know. Whatever. Hello everyone. This is your friend Carlz with another week of comic book recommendations. I gotta mention a couple of news that I've been not necessarily excited but quite curious. The first one is the event of, they call it the X-Men event of 2026, but I doubt it's gonna be the only one. Marvel announced DNX, X-Men Fantastic Four crossover, and it's directly tied to what happened during the Age of Revelation event, which overall I liked and I managed to talk a lot. The basic plot involves Beast. I recently talked with someone about Beast and how he became such an interesting character. When people say like superheroes don't change that much, you can show them Beast. Beast is one of those characters. Long story short, the current Beast, which is kind of like a really bad guy in a way, quote unquote, actually went to the Age of Revelation and he came back. So he came back to make sure that the Age of Revelation actually happens. So the DNX event is gonna be kind of like the retelling of the story. We already know from the Age of Revelation that the virus had that it didn't destroy the world, but it had quite an effect in creating the Age of Revelation. So this is the tangent point, as the Doc Brown says in Back to the Future, right? This is the tangent. Here is when we will see if the future is gonna change or not. Obviously it's gonna change. I mean, who are we kidding? But anyway, this is the event that they have been kind of like aiming at. A lot of Beast Center stuff is gonna be there. I don't know how they're gonna coordinate everything we've seen from the X-Men to this point. It's curious that it's a Fantastic Four related event. I don't see, or we didn't really see the Fantastic Four that much during the Age of Revelation event. So I don't know how they're gonna tie it, and I don't know exactly how this relates to the Shadows of Tomorrow. Unless Shadows of Tomorrow basically meant the Shadows of Tomorrow of the Age of Revelation. you know? But anyways, it's fun to see some weird mutations, and I love the Fantastic Four, I love the X-Men, so I'm excited anyway. When we get DNX by Jed McKay and Federico Vicenti in the art. This is for when I have it. Is it like June? September, man. Wow. And the other piece of news that I wanted to talk is that anyone remembers those Mask toys and animated series? Like they were like crappy Transformers or anything. So I recently learned that Dan Waters is gonna write Mask, Mobile Armor Strike Command with a K. Wow. And it's gonna be the new title as part of the Energonverse at Image. Of course, this is led by Robert Kirkman, and I don't know. I don't remember for the life of me ever liking or ever being interested in that Mask thing. Of course I remember it because it was part of the whole Hasbro thing back then, but I don't remember shit about it. So I found it really curious, and when I start reading kind of like the press release about it, and you have the what is the basic plot? The pilots, they wear like masks which allows them to control their vehicles in a really special way, like I don't know, like Knight Rider or something. I don't know, it's pretty weird. It's pretty weird that they chose that IP, but then again, how many more kind of like Hasbro IPs could have they make part or made part of the Energon universe? You know? So even though it sounds really, really weird, I guess it's fine. The one thing that bothers me, I mean, not bothers me, but preoccupies me, is that the Energon universe is already quite taking off. So I don't know which place are they gonna have these masked people. They'll probably be like gonna be like some commando type shit, you know. But anyways, probably more than one person had like was like a mask fan. They were like, oh, Transformer is for losers, so is G.I. Joe. I'm a mask fan through and through. Imagine that. I was so not necessarily surprised, but I was like, why? Like, who are these masked people? And I'm talking back then. I'm not talking now. I'm talking back then. Back then, I was a toy guy, a toy kid. I love the whole G.I. Joe Transformers. Like, it was made for you. It was made for you as a kid. But these masked guys, they were just random guys with cars, right? Whatever. But anyways, there's a tidbit of news, and regarding new issues this week, it's one of those weird weeks where you got like a bunch of number 2s or number 3s, and when the number 1 of a new book is not like a breakthrough or anything, I'm really not too keen on talking about number 2s. I think at least 3 issues are necessary for you to take a good grasp of what you are reading and where the story is going. So it's a really weird week. So I picked the things, not necessarily the most interesting things, because leaving out Batwoman, which is generally more interesting, New Titans, Wonder Woman, but I think those issues gave a good enough first issue, like a really strong impression, and they have characters and plot lines already interesting enough. So I'm gonna talk with other number 2s, like Imperial Guardians is also number 2 or issue 2. I like saying issue, but sometimes it just feels wrong, you know. But anyways, let's give it a talk. First off, this is not a number 2, but you know, I think I haven't talked about Absolute Batman in a couple of weeks. The new story arc of Absolute Batman is gonna be a big one. So they sort of introduced the Absolute Joker in kind of like a tangential way just before. They didn't go full on the backstory or anything, and I don't think they will, because it's a Joker. It needs some kind of like a mystique around it. But this new story of Absolute Batman, it kind of points to be I'm sorry, the starting point of Batman as a whole, as a Gotham feel, rogue feel world. You know, Robins, Scarecrows, I don't know. I feel like in a way, until now, everything was a setup, and now we're getting proper Batman, proper Gotham, full of baddies, and with the older Absolute versions, which are all amazing. The last story arc was basically based on Absolute Poison Ivy, which is like a monster. It's amazing. It was amazing. It was like a monster, but it kept a little seedling of Poison Ivy, of Pamela, of a human, but it was way monstrous than Poison Ivy has ever been. It was amazing, and in a way, Batman himself has taken like a backseat to all of the rogues and all of the bad guys that have began to develop, and I think that is one of the most interesting things about Absolute Batman. Not necessarily Batman, but the rogues. It's like we were born alongside the Penguin, Killer Croc, Two-Face, like all of these characters, like brand new, like you saw them from the beginning. uh, you don't have to go to a reference book, or like, oh, I wasn't alive fucking 70 years ago when these characters were born. Now you did. Now you've been there. Now you know who they are. Now you know how they begin, and then you can live their lives alongside them for however long the Absolute Universe lasts. It's been doing so good that I think it's gonna be a long time. But who knows? New story arc for Absolute Batman. Excited as ever. This series, as many of the Absolute ones, they just don't disappoint. Just they don't. Next. Speaking of disappointment, I said that I was gonna talk about number twos and everything. Like, Catwoman's return to Gotham is weird. Apparently, like, the main villain, Black Mask, hasn't appeared in a long time. But for the life of me, I couldn't remember when was the last time he was in. Here's the thing. I don't think Black Mask is a cool character. For the level of rogues you have in Gotham, Black Mask is just a gangster. So the funny thing is, like, I read the press release, and like, Catwoman faces Black Mask again, and I'm like, didn't she do that? Like, didn't she just do that before the whole story arc in Europe? Didn't she just do that? And of course she hasn't, like, in a while, but I feel like every Catwoman story for the past, like, couple of years is just her against some random gangster. That's it. It's just her against some random gangster. So this again takes the shape of the type of recommendations you do. Not because you are excited, not because you have something particular to recommend or something peculiar to be excited about. No, these are the sort of comic books that you are so in love, in a way, with the character, with the story, that you keep reading them. Sorry, but that has been Catwoman for me for a long time. I think since after the whole wedding debacle, I think after that, like, just has been a character without a proper space. If her proper unique space is just gonna be fighting gangsters, I don't think that's gonna be that exciting, because it always goes the same way. The gangster's pretty bad, like, she's kind of like a anti-hero bad guy kind of, and she goes and she borderlines do something that is kind of like controversial. Batman may appear, and seems too stereotypical, too trope heavy. But anyways, if you are like me and you love the character, you're gonna keep following her. Next. This was so close to being my book of the week, because I've talked about G.I. Joe, and I said this is mostly an episode with a lot of follow-throughs and updates. When they did the story about Scarlet, and kind of like the way the Arashikage, which is the clan that is associated with Cobra at some point, but they are their own kind of like Japanese mafia. But the most important thing is that Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes are related to that. What is so important to me in this case? Not necessarily Scarlet, even though her story as a spy was pretty fun. When I was a kid, I was all about Snake Eyes. I love the character. Back then I still thought ninjas were cool. Well, I still think they are kind of cool, but not as cool as when I was a kid. but I was craving for them to bring that to the G.I. Joe main universe in the Energon universe. Energon main universe, Energon universe. I just wanted them to bring that side to it. So if this is gonna be that point, I'm glad that it's gonna happen. One thing that hasn't really happened in the in Energon universe's G.I. Joe books is that they haven't done this thing the G.I. Joe used to do back in the old animation days, where they would have like special G.I. Joe areas for something. You know, the ninjas, the guys that go in the ocean, the guys that are spies, because this is a really small team of G.I. Joes. So Scarlet is a spy, so is Covergirl, another of the characters. They seem to have similar functions, but in way smaller degrees. So I'm hoping that them bringing Scarlet and the Arashikage back to the main G.I. Joe is gonna bring a little bit more of that variety to it. Because when you think about it, the current G.I. Joe run has been quite centered on the Transformers thing. It was the beginning of it, and it has been the ongoing conflict and inspiration for all they do, uncovering the mystery of the Energon and how Cobra plans to use it. So, since the story has been so much set in stone, Transformer has been doing their own thing. Boy Rivals, of course, they have been doing their own thing. But G.I. Joe is the one book that seems to be attached to the hip to the other ones, like depending way too much on what they do. So any kind of like little change like this, like bringing the Arashikage to the main book, is something that is exciting. So that's G.I. Joe 21. Next. Speaking of number twos, as I stated before, I'm not that much of a Lobo fan, but this one was by Scotty and Jorge Corona, right? So I read number one, and the whole plot of Lobo, kind of like Lobo's life being acquired by kind of like a TV or like an intergalactic, like it was just confusing. It was just confusing. But why am I recommending 2 as an update? I think, and more than that, I hope that they're not gonna just do like a full-on Deadpool like we've come to get used to, that sort of fourth wall breaking story in Deadpool. I don't know. It gave me some hope that it's gonna rely a little bit more on what I like about this duo of writer artist, and it is in the comedic side. And that sort of reminded me that whatever I like about Lobo, it has to do with his comedic side. I've never liked the arrogant kind of like Lobo, like, because is he exactly, I'm not even sure what his power set really is. He is kind of like indestructible, I think he's kind of like indestructible. So his arrogance comes from him being indestructible and being the last Caesarian. That's how you pronounce it, right? Caesarian. It's all attached to that. But number one, or issue one, gave me the hope that this is gonna go to the comedy side. And if it goes to the comedy side, even if you don't like the character, you can still read it for fun. I think that was my big take with 1, and my big expectation for 2. That's why I'm talking about it. I have higher expectations. If they hadn't brought this pair to do this book, I would ignore it. I would have ignored it. But hey, let's hope it gets fun. Next. So, I'm not gonna say that I like the current Thundercats books by Dynamite. I have mixed feelings about it. Now they are going towards the Thundercats Silverhawks crossover event, but up until then, for the Thundercat side, it was all about Leon and him getting lost and them meeting Leono's future version. So Leono or Leono in this current version of the Thundercats, it's probably the most interesting character. Why is that? Because he's really unhinged. Leono, like when you remember it from the kids show from the 80s, he was just this leader, unbreakable leader, like already top tier leader. But here he is unhinged. He is insecure. He is violent, aggressive, and as he gets kind of like literally cursed by the, what is the name of the thing? Well, he kind of sees the future, but that doesn't give him strength of leadership. It just makes him paranoid. So they have built these more serious Thundercats based on that, on this crazy unhinged Lionel and how he reflected on, let's say, Panthro as like the military leader, Chitara as the person who basically raised him, and she has become like the real heart of the team. So they have mixed everything, but one thing that was missing was the role of Mumm-Ra. They have hinted that, I don't want to spoil the latest Thundercats, but basically they made their own version of the story on why the Thundercats are on Earth, or the third Earth. No, it's called the third planet. So apparently Mumm-Ra has some sort of relationship with Jaga, who was the leader of the Thundercats before Lionel. And anyways, it's a convoluted plot, but basically this book, Mumm-Ra the Ever Living, is gonna tell us the story of this current Thundercat universe, Mumm-Ra. And as I said, we already had the core elements in the good size, Lionel and Chitara basically, and now we need to know about Mumm-Ra, the bad guy. And hopefully it will shed some light on the further plot of Third Earth in this universe. I said this week was gonna be mostly number 2s, but hey, this one is an important one. Mumm-Ra the Ever Living. Next. Smile for the Camera was a fun surprise, but at the same time kind of like a weird one. Smile 1 is a completely different movie from Smile 2. Smile 2 added a lot of social commentary to its plot. And the type of social commentary that Smile 2 added had a lot to do with show business and kind of like some vices and problems that are basically part or inherited parts of show business, especially the music side. So Smile for the Camera kind of like took that same idea and put it in the modeling business. So in a way, it wasn't really that refreshing. It didn't felt that new. It felt like coming from Smile 2. Felt a little bit like, yeah, I feel like I've seen this before. The big spin they did for Smile for the Camera, comparing to Smile 2 the movie, is that they brought a much kind of like just a bigger cast of characters. They made this in kind of like a modeling academy, so there's there's a lot of characters, and you won't have to wait for the Smile curse to be passed from one to another in a really slow way. It's gonna be fast. So we are seeing the mix and the how can you say it? It's not interconnection, but the interaction between the characters in a rhythm and manner that is faster than any movie can achieve, and that has been the appeal for it. It still holds to that horror element with commentary and with substance as it does in Smile 2, but you gotta juggle a little bit of what I'm saying, like between it being the same, between it doesn't really having that much novelty, but at the same time adding some novelty. You need to see for yourself what you think for it. But it's interesting. It's interesting just as much as Smile 2 was. The bar is pretty high. Whoa, don't hit the ceiling. Next. So, I talked about Starfleet Academy, not last week, the last week. And man, I've been avoiding Star Trek comics because there are way too many of them, and I don't want to get into them because I would probably want to read them all. I know they have expanded on plots like the Borg. They have expanded on Deep Space Nine. They expanded on Star Trek Enterprise, on Discovery. They have done a lot. Star Trek comics are like as big as the shows in like a volume of quantity of content wise. That was the expression I was looking for. Content wise, there's a lot of content to be had in the comics, in Star Trek comic books, but I don't know, I don't want to sound mean, but it is a lesser form compared to the shows. I love comic books. That's why I talk about them every week. But when I compare Star Trek, a show, to a comic book, I don't know why it feels like a lesser medium. But the whole Starfleet Academy debacle that we have faced recently, with the cancellation of the show and not having any more Star Trek shows in development, I think this might be a desperation move going into the Star Trek comic books. This would be literally my first Star Trek comic book. Literally. But as I said on my Starfleet Academy episode, I think the show has so much potential, and it could have been so much more if they gave them a chance, that I guess I'm taking the comic book as the chance that the show is never gonna get. That's it. So we'll see how it is. Star Trek Starfleet Academy Lost Contact. I don't even know how long it's gonna be. Will they cancel it as well? Apparently it's gonna be just one story with the characters from the show. Who knows? Next. This is one I talked about. I'm pretty sure I talked about last week. But why am I mentioning again? Almost the penultimate episode in the Death Spiral saga with Venom issue 257. Why am I mentioning this book again? You know, I keep hating to mention it for this thing, but for some reason everybody hated that the character that married Mary Jane before she came back, right? This guy Paul, that she got in love with was it another dimension? I think it was another dimension or another Earth. But with this issue I found out something new about the whole Venom debacle. Apparently people not only hate that the Paul character, but they begin to hate on Carlos Gomez, which has been the artist for the main artist for the Venom book for the last couple of volumes, or the last volume, I think. People seem to be really fed up with Venom in general, and I don't know. I think what I wanted to say, I already mentioned that the Dead Spiral event has been mid. I think what I wanted to say is that what this has revealed to me is that when things are going wrong, you can always add Spider-Man to it. And that's literally what I thought. Like, so much shit is happening with Venom and Mary Jane, and people hated Paul and they don't like the artist, and some people like it, some people don't. As I mentioned before, I thought it was okay, and I like as a concept Mary Jane as the new host, and I hope it remains that way. I hope they keep exploring that concept beyond the current Venom volume and beyond the Spiral. I really hope they keep exploring that. But other than that, I think that, like, for I was gonna say for bad and for worse, but like literally for bad, people just hated this experiment, and I'm baffled at the amount of hate and disdain this book created. I really do. I've been talking about Venom for a long time. Even when I had my old show, my old comic book podcast in Spanish, even then I was following Venom when even before the King in Black, like for a long time. When it was this other guy, that grunge guy. It seems I've been talking about Venom for a long time, and I reached that point when I realized that I think people are really fed up with the character. But if they had followed the plot lines laid out in the King in Black saga, if Eddie Brock had remained being a god and everything, there's nothing more to go there. And in a really strange way, that reminds me of what I disliked about Spawn. You know, like you take a character and you put it out there, you make it reach like levels of development, story wise, comic wise, that like you can't go higher. Eddie Brock was a fucking god. Like, how do you go higher than that? Literally. And I think that affected how people saw this character all the way up until now. You know, they already promised a shake-up, like a new Venom, a new Carnage. Like, who knows? In the end, Dead Spiral was just that. Like a really, it's preface, right? Like the epilogue is later and before. Preface, it sounds too much in Spanish. Prologue. It was just a prologue to what they're gonna do with the character. And as I said, I hope that even if this didn't work, they keep exploring Mary Jane as Venom. I really hope they do. Next. I wasn't a fan of Ultimate Wolverine, as I said before. Like, even though it's probably my favorite Wolverine skin in Marvel Rivals. But now it's coming to an end, and they are saying that the ending of Ultimate Wolverine is gonna be directly related to Ultimate Endgame, and they're gonna bring the character all the way back to the quote-unquote main story that's gonna end the current iteration of the Ultimate Universe. I think it's important because of that, but more than that, and a thing that I want to rescue about the character now that it's ending, I saw Ultimate Wolverine as a time capsule. I remember him mentioning when I was talking about Logan and the black, white, and red, is it? Or red, black, and whatever. But the Logan solo book that has a bunch of short stories about the period before Wolverine, when he was just Logan, right? And how that book basically encapsulates moments of the character that you don't necessarily see nowadays for like a really fully developed Wolverine. So Ultimate Wolverine felt like a time capsule of early Wolverine, and kind of like appealing to that same vein of like violence and action, and the drama, the intensity, the emotional, like in a physical and an emotional way that was Wolverine years ago in the main universe. So in hindsight, I think, like, even though I wasn't a big fan, I think in hindsight I really liked it. And like heading towards the end, I think my biggest gripe, but this is not an Ultimate Wolverine thing. My biggest gripe in this iteration of the Ultimate Universe, and I think the whole mutant didn't have the cohesion that I would have liked them to have. Like, I felt like in this current Ultimate Universe, the mutants were all over the place, and they didn't really come together. Towards the end of Ultimate Wolverine, it seemed that it might change towards that. You have like the big bad mutants being like dictators of, I don't know, is it Russia? And you have the Phoenix being captured and being used. You have the whole side of the kind of like the rebellious mutants, Gambit and Sabretooth. They knew Logan before he became the Winter Soldier in this case. But then you have the Ultimate X-Men, Peach Momoko's quirky, fun, manga-like book. Then you have in Black Panther, you have what was Storm names in that book? Queen of Storms, I think, or like the Queen of the Weather or something like that. So you had all the X-Men really dispersed throughout this run of the Ultimate Universe. They were all over the place. They never come together like as one common force. Is that necessarily bad? No, it didn't help to feel the intensity of the story as a whole mutant unified front, as it does in the main comics, right? Like all mutants, even though they have different books and different stories, you always feel like every mutant is part of the same story. But anyways, Ultimate Wolverine is coming to an end, directly tied to Ultimate Endgame, and as I've mentioned before, and probably everybody knows, there is another Ultimate Universe event coming after that. We're not sure if it's gonna be a continuation of the Ultimate Universe. We don't know anything, and that's good in this case. Next, last but not least, and the book of the week, Wynd, The Power of Blood by James Tynion IV and Michael Dialianias, is finally coming to an end with issue number 8. There's one thing that I have to say about Wynd, is that I loved the beginning of it. I mentioned it more than one time. It was emotional, it was, if I'm allowed to say, it was queer, it was adventurous, it was fantastic, it had violence, it had mystery, it had everything, and it had a great rhythm. But The Power of the Blood and the final story arc of the book hasn't been my favorite for one reason and one reason only. It didn't have the proper rhythm. I don't like when, probably because logistics and editorial decisions, they cut these stories short. The last Wynd story, it was really a climax or a third act of a story. So if you take a climax, which is just one event, and you start chopping it down into pieces, you dilute the tension of it. So suddenly you come to the end and you didn't get the impetu, the drive, the intensity that a climax should have. When the final story arc of the book began, we already had all the factions in their places. We already had all the characters having kind of like their goal. Like we had everything. We had every setup ready. But it just felt diluted. In the book didn't came regularly enough to me. You lost the tension. But anyways, Wynd was a great story. It had everything, and I think now that it's ending, I think it's gonna look amazing as a trade paperback, as a compendium. Like if you read the Wynd story as just one, it's gonna get even better. It will get even better because, as I said, the main problem with this last part of the story is that it was too segmented. It felt too drawn out by the publishing rhythm, and that is not something that you can blame the story, but that is sadly something that happens to the format. They should have made it shorter. They should have made it probably even like a week or something, like a weekly or like a bi-weekly thing. They just have just done it. It was the last story arc. They already kind of like got all what they could get out of before. So I don't know. That's my personal opinion. I think the climax got a little bit diluted by the publication rhythm, and overall it didn't help the end of the story. But anyways, I had to recommend it one last time because it was a great book. Of course, I haven't read the ending yet, so hold on. But it was a great book. So if someone hasn't picked up this book by now and they are like, of course I'm not gonna tell you to jump in the last issue, but wait until they release either the last story as just one volume, or until they get the whole thing as a compendium. But goodbye, Wynd. It was a great ride. And that's it for this week. Another really can you call it like a transition week? Perhaps you can, right? Like a transition week where everything is building up. I'm really looking forward, especially to the Batwoman and the Wonder Woman side. I really wanna know what happens with the current Venom and stuff. The whole X-Men line is being really good. I want to talk a little bit more about Iron Man as well, but I want to give it more time to develop, because what I hate the most about books that I kind of like is when the rhythm is not there. I was just talking about rhythm, but regarding to TV shows, I was watching the show Ozark, and I was thinking about the concept of the perfect thriller story rhythm, where you have to give the viewer, the reader, the person on the other side, you have to give them little tidbits of emotion, story, or action at every turn. And I think sometimes they take too long to do setups in one of these new stories. If you reach issue 3 or issue 4, like for example in Iron Man, they were like, oh, like apparently the Avengers are going to intervene. There's something there that triggered the rest of the heroes on Iron Man's story. Okay, they tell you that, but you need to keep, needing that. You need to keep working on that. If you let it stay, it becomes stale. But anyways, that's another week of comic books. The one thing that keeps us sane. That might be an exaggeration, but it is kind of like the thing I look for the most, like weekly. Well, besides some other stuff, but like, okay, whatever. So thank you everyone for listening. I hope you get all of the books you want, all of your pulls, and you are a happy camper, just as me sometimes. See you all next week. Thank you for listening, and bye bye. Listen to my other shows.